Hello, everyone. Welcome to Paranormal Roundtable. I'm your host, Josh Turner, and this is PRT. Now there's some really cool music. And then we come back and we're like, we're back, folks. So just pretend and visualize that happened.
Yeah.
Yes, we get it. We're not big on production value. What we are big on, though, is telling people's encounters or having them come on and tell their encounters. And if you're not checking out the YouTube channel and you're just listening to us on Spotify, man, I'm telling you, you're missing out. Do both, because on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday, we are on the air. Monday is call-in show, and you get people coming on and jumping on there and telling their encounters, and it goes on for 3 or 4 hours every Monday. And then Wednesday, we have where we retell people's encounters, and then Friday we have a single guest that comes on, and they can be an experiencer, a researcher, an author, another YouTuber, a podcaster, whatever. And this week it'll be Jason McLean talking about the end times. Last week it was James Barley. We were talking about vampires, reptilians, and a little bit of werewolf stuff. And then Sunday we retell people's encounters, and then Monday we do it all over again. And then of course Tuesday it's the podcast. You might get a guest, you might get me retelling encounters, whatever. Tonight, what are we gonna do? Potluck?
Yeah, I mean, we could just kind of jump all over the place with it, give people some variety.
Yeah, that's what we're doing. Yeah, and I let Anthony. I have several different things ready to go. I'm going to let him kind of choose which direction we go. We agreed we're going to start with this one.
Mm-hmm.
This guy's name is Nick, right? And he had a weird encounter with something. Before we do that, though, we have a Patreon, and it's the best way to help support the show. It's a $10, $20, $30, $40, $50 tier. Each a tier ascending higher into better merch, more stuff, more merch. After 2 months, if you're on the $10 tier, you get a book, a sticker, and then on the $20 tier, you get that plus a shirt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then $30 tier, you get 2 books and a shirt and a whatever, and then 40 you get like that plus a hat.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my books, so you get 3 books, and then on the $50 tier, you get 4 books. Both of my books are werewolves and the Dogman phenomena and the Bigfoot phenomena.
And all the books are autographed,
and
by the way.
Autographed by me or whoever wrote them.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2 other books by someone, anybody. It could be anybody from the field: Josh Cutchin, Ken Gerhardt, Chad Lewis, Lyle Blackburn, David Weatherly. A lot of my friends that are cryptid authors, And so that's what we do. And so you could get a book from any one of those people, and then you could get my books, and then you'll get the shirt and the hat. And we were doing hoodies. We're almost out, though, of shirts and hoodies. We're getting the order back up now. We ordered a bunch because we were out of large. We barely had any mediums to begin with. We were out of large, extra large, 2X, and then 3X. And I was like, well, we got nothing left.
Yeah.
So we had to reorder. So we're getting those done. We mailed off 22 packages just a few days ago. So you're expecting your stuff. And we do a giveaway on the YouTube live stream. This is not live, folks. If you listen to me right now, this is a pre-record. If you're on YouTube, you're thinking, is this live or it's not? No, there's a chat, though, you can join, too. If you watch this on YouTube, you can join in the chat.
Yeah, if you watch it as it drops, there's a live chat, but it's still a pre-recorded episode.
Yeah. So go check that out. Join the PRT membership. You can get a membership. It's $5, and your name is in green, and you can be chosen for the giveaway on Monday, Wednesdays, Sundays, Fridays, whatever. 2 people every time. So we try to give away at least half a dozen to sometimes a dozen, maybe even more things every week. So yeah, and then every 2 weeks we mail. So it's like I think it's every second, every other Wednesday? Thursday. Mm-hmm. Every other Thursday.
Yeah.
Mail. So that's what we're doing, folks. So be vigilant, like and subscribe, hit that bell so that you can get the notification and you won't miss any of the great content. So at least that's what I hear. I hear we have great content. I don't know, do we? There's some people out there like, you don't. You have terrible content and you suck and you're a poo-poo cockahead. Well, sorry about that. I try not to.
Yeah, those people are called Redditors.
They're on Reddit. They're so angry. Oh, and then they're like, I know him personally. There's all these people claiming they know me personally. Maybe they talked to me at a conference or something, or I walked by them and they say they know me personally. I'm like, okay. A lot of people claiming that they know me personally, and I'm like, who in the heck is this person?
Yeah.
You know, and I'm somebody. I'm nobody. I'm just saying, like, but they're saying like they know me enough to critique.
It reminds me of that scene on that stupid Avengers movie when what's the name of that witch?
Scarlet Witch.
Yeah, Scarlet
we've
Witch.
talked about that.
Yeah, she's like, you took everything from me.
And Thanos
and he's like, I don't even know who you are. And then he punches her so hard, he literally punches her out of the movie. Because after that, she doesn't make another single appearance in the entire movie. So it's like, you're that insignificant. Nobody cares. All right? Just slow your roll, man. Slow it down.
Yeah, so don't be Scarlet Witch is all we're saying. I mean,
it's not going to end well.
We're not trying to, whatever. So we had somebody on the show the other night on a Monday, and we were talking about we were doing the people could call in and whatever, but it's not a call in. They jump on the live.
Yeah.
We put the link out there, but anyway, he got on there and he goes by the nickname. But anyway, it's not important. What he was talking about was important. And he was talking about seeing a triangular alien craft. Well, this individual who sent me a story, and this was just an email that I read, I thought it was interesting, but I emailed him back and I told him what I thought about it. And it was something that I had discussed before, and I've discussed it on the show too previously. He saw something when he was jogging. He was running. He has 2 dogs he runs with, and he lives in the suburbs of a city in Georgia. And so he was running, and he just thought, you know what? I'll let my dogs. It's late at night. It was like 2 a.m. It was literally 2 a.m. And he had just gone out, and he was only about a quarter mile from his house. This guy, ex-Marine, he jogs 2.5 miles one way and then 2.5 miles back. He does it every night. And this is after he lifts weights.
Jeez.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, yeah, that alone is it's pretty rough, man. So kudos, but he's also 32 years old. I mean, he's young compared to me.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking, dang, dude, that's pretty good. But he, and he said he's been doing it for a long time. So I asked him that question. I said, how long have you, I messaged him back. I said, how long have you been jogging that much? And he says he's been doing it since he got out of the Corps when he was like 24 years old. So, I mean, you figure this person is in pretty good shape. So it's not like somebody who just started out doing it and they were, not to be ugly or mean, but they're really out of shape. Maybe they fell over and were having some kind of weird hallucination or near-death experience. And they're like, I'm seeing things, man. I'm seeing stars, man. No, this dude actually, he's in pretty good shape, and this has never happened to him before. But he was jogging, and so he lives. It's right outside of Athens, Georgia. So,
yeah.
So anyway, he was. It's not like it's a big secret, but Nick was jogging, and this happened to him, like fairly recently, about 2 years ago. Because he says he's moved, but when he was staying there, and it got weirder. Like a couple of things happened to him after that, and it's not real long and in depth, but he was jogging. He has 2 dogs. He says one is a Doberman Pinscher, the other is a Golden Retriever. And so him and his girlfriend together had gotten the Golden Retriever. Now he was going through some emotional stuff. They had separated. They were living separate. Now they're back together, and they're living in Atlanta or the suburbs of Atlanta. But at that time, he was jogging, and he didn't notice at the time, but his dogs both tucked their tails. Well, the Doberman didn't, but the other one tucked its tail, and they both ran and stood by by one of the neighbor's fences that was a quarter mile up the road, or a little less than a quarter mile, according to what he said on the email. But he said he heard the dogs whimpering, and he looked over, and he saw that they were urinating, like they were both urinating. These are both female dogs, And he thought, what in the heck is going on? And he looks around, he doesn't see anything. And then he sees a light, a quick blue light flash. And he looks up and he sees this, what looks like a triangle, like a craft.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like what, the guy said on the show the other night. It looked like a Dorito, like a black Dorito. And he looks up and he sees it and he's just like, what in the heck am I looking at? And this thing could have been behind him the whole time. It was dark and that day it was kind of overcast and didn't rain, but it was threatening rain and it didn't happen. But he said something that we've heard, multiple times on the show. There was no sound.
Yeah.
No sound at all. That is so creepy to me. Okay. What bothers me about that is it's like spiders and snakes. They're quiet. You could put your hand down.
Yeah.
And I had a wolf spider just crawl right over my hand one time when I was like 10 or 11 years old, and I was at my friend's grandparents' house at their ranch, and I'm sitting under the bed or by the bed, and we're playing some game like Monopoly or something with two other people, and the spider just crawls right over my hand, and he was huge. Wolf spiders they're pretty
nasty
harmless,
looking.
but they're gnarly, dude.
Yeah.
But they're good because they'll kill and eat brown recluses and anything else that they find,
Yeah.
And so anyways, that you don't even hear it, but it's there, and that's what's creepy about this. Now, I told him, I asked him, I said, what time of night, all that. I asked him all those questions. Had this ever happened to him before? He said, no, but he did get the feeling many times when he was jogging that he was being followed or watched. And his dogs for a while there had dipped out. They wouldn't go with him.
Oh, even the dogs.
Yeah, so
no.
This could have been going on. The important thing, though, is that at least twice in the month prior to this happening, this was in the spring, and I thought it was interesting because it happened in April, and we're in April. And he said, dude, at least, a couple of times, the month prior in March, he said, he felt like there was like a chill going down his back. Now, it was kind of cold at some of the times when he was jogging. Religiously, he does it every night. And, not so much as he used to. Not as much as he used to. But, and he said, dude, I wonder how many times this thing could have been behind me. I didn't know it. So I asked the obvious question. I messaged him and I said, hey, did you have any missing time? And he said, I might have. So I messaged him again and I said, Nick, what do you mean maybe? What is that? And he said, well, one time, he goes, I was out jogging. I got started a little bit late, about 3 a.m. He said he works until midnight at his job, what he was doing at that time anyway. And he would be up for a little bit. He would go to the gym. He'd get out of the gym, go home, and then he would jog for, 5 miles. He had a little routine he would do. And it was like through this subdivision. And it was really like you're doing this every night, like religiously. And then all of a sudden, you do it one night and it takes 2 hours longer. When you come home, it's almost 5 a.m. Yeah. And now I got to preface it too, like on the nights where he does legs, he doesn't jog. So that's only, 2 nights out of the week.
That makes sense.
Yeah, he doesn't jog because it's catabolic at that point.
Yeah.
And it can be catabolic if you're trying to get bigger, but he's not. He's trying to stay in shape. But I don't believe in running too much because it can really be bad for your joints. And it can actually age you because it releases free radicals. Yeah. But if you jog shorter time, like you only jog for 30 minutes, that's good.
Yeah.
Jogging longer than that, not good.
Swimming even better.
It's like lifting weights. You shouldn't lift like 2 hours. And now here's the thing about that. I'm going to segue into this real quick here. It's not going to take long. But if you lift and you do these hour and a half to 2 hour, whatever, try to limit it to 2, maybe 3 times a week at the most. You don't want to do it every day. You don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. And as you get older, it's more important to do all of your upper body in one go. Lower body, and that because if you do the same, you're overworking your joints, and it's actually counterproductive. Trust me, from somebody who's been doing it for years, and I've lost lots of weight a couple of times in my life. I've knocked over 100 pounds off of me, and I know how to do it. And I'm telling you what works, and I can tell you. But that's my advice to you. Do what you got to do. But being sedentary is a killer. because I did that just working security and just gained a bunch of weight back, and you got to lose it. You know, it's rough. But I applaud people who can do that. Just saying that. So he's jogging every night, but he comes back and he's like, it's 4 a.m. He goes, and that particular night he left at like 1:40 in the morning. So what in the heck happened? How did it take him that much longer? And I said, do you remember stopping? You know, I messaged him and he said, no, and then I said, well, did you remember anything? No. Decidedly no. It happened again. A little shorter duration, but yeah, at least a couple of hours gone. And it started to freak him out. And the second time, it was really freaky because he got started about 2:30. He got, a little bit later. And he came in at like 5:30. And his girlfriend was like, where were you? And that actually started to be a problem because he started having these weird dreams. And she wanted him to go get some help, like see somebody. And he's like who? A shrink? I'm not going to go see a shrink. And she's like, well, you're talking in your sleep. And here's the weird thing. She recorded him one night talking. And he was and then on my suggestion, they went and they got it, backwards, the back mask.
Yeah.
I said, well, there's people that will talk and then, they'll play it backwards and there'll be a message. It turns out he was speaking in Latin backwards.
Oh.
And it only happened once where they could decipher. The rest of it was like all gibberish. They couldn't decipher anything. So then, and this guy's been a listener of my show for a while. I say my show. You're not a part of it. It's just me. Folks, I did it all myself. These people here, they're horrible people. They do not help. They just hinder. I'm joking. They do a lot. But no, he said, I've been listening to your show for a while. He's like, and when you started talking about people, the demons, how they speak backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And so he starts telling me, he's like, after that, when I saw the craft, he goes, it just hovered and then it just went up, 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 and then took off at a weird angle and went like zigzag, right way, left way, whatever. He was curious, like he started having dreams where he was remembering, like he started remembering the dreams. And I think what it did, it triggered something in him seeing that craft. What happened on one of his jogs, according to a dream, because he said it was just a dream. Now, I don't personally believe this. I think it was him reliving what had happened. And it was a dream, yes, but it was telling him.
It was of something that actually happened.
Yeah, there was some substance there. He doesn't want to believe that, but that's up to him, I personally think that this is what was going on. And he saw these weird lizardy looking type beings. He was like stunned, like he was motionless by this blue beam. And then the next thing you know, he wakes up and he's on this craft and he sees this is what's really traumatic, was he sees what appear to be two bodies, and they're nude bodies, a male and a female, and they look like they're unalived. And so he's sitting there looking at them and he's like, what am I looking at? And then he realizes that he's surrounded by these panels and these instruments and all this weird stuff. And when he gets up and starts looking around, moving around the room, it appears to be a very sterile environment. This door opens, like slides open, and this weird lizard-like creature walks in. They take him, they basically tell him without speaking just to lay down on a table. And they put a mask on his face, and next thing you know, he's jogging again. So, there are people who have said before, and I'm pretty sure James Bartley was one of them that but we talked about it way back in the Gap. But there's many people I've interviewed and talked to them and whatever. This triangular craft that people see. There are two different things going on with that, what I'm going to tell you. And that's his story. That's pretty much it. He doesn't remember anything other than that. There was no more to be had. But he asked me what I thought it was. And I said, well, there are those that believe that these are the Drake, the Reptilians. And there was a deal that was struck back in the day with the Eisenhower administration between them, the Greys, and another race of aliens, the tall whites. And they were given permission, like basically carte blanche, hey, you go and you abduct however many people you need, whatever, give us this technology.
Mm-hmm.
One of the technologies that was given to us was you can have this spaceship to back engineer, but we're not going to give you all the parts. Because then you'll have the codes to infinite energy, which really is just the ability to create these craft, and they have a propulsion system that is only used when they go into the upper atmosphere. These craft, the smaller ones, the smaller triangles, they don't go and this is me talking about from experience, from what I know. Okay, from what people have talked to me, my research, this is what I know. I don't have time in an hour-long episode to sit here and go, we talked about it more in depth on the live stream. Go check it out. But what they do is they follow a grid. And so whenever people see these craft, and I told Nick this was my typed out long explanation, that zigzag looking pattern, like he saw that craft do that, how it turns right real quick and then goes straight and then turns right, left, whatever. They're following a grid that's laid out across the planet that's already here and that has been here for a long time. Something built that grid. And these alien craft, if you want to call them aliens, interdimensional, there's all this big argument about who or what they are. Who cares? They're not us, okay? The other beings that come here from wherever the heck they come here from. And they can turn right, left, straight in these weird, like very straight lines because they're following that grid that's made up of a bunch of squares. When they stop and they kind of hover,
Mm-hmm.
they're in between. They're either on one of the ley lines or they're in between them.
Yeah.
When they're kind of wobbling, that's them in between. I could get really in depth into that and start telling you all this other stuff about it and about the nature of their craft. And when you see them come apart, like one that looks like an orb, and they'll come apart and like 5 or 6 different
Mm-hmm.
orbs will come out.
Yeah, that's a common thing.
Yeah, that's the bigger ship is releasing the smaller ones out, which are typically manned by just like 2 or 3 people or beings.
So they're coming out of like a mothership.
A mothership, yeah. And they're also a part of it, and they can go into it and make it into bigger triangle. Does it make sense?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So anyways, that's what that is. And I told him that, and I said, you're lucky. I don't say for lucky, but he's a God-fearing person. Maybe God, that's, I don't know how much faith he had or whatever, but just emailing with somebody, it's hard to know.
Yeah.
Not that I don't think you're an untrustworthy person, Nick. I didn't speak to you. I like to speak to as many people as I can, but I can't. It's pretty obvious. I just don't have the time.
Yeah. But so you're saying that the triangle ones, those typically don't go into the upper atmosphere?
No, I'm not saying that. There's a mothership that can go into orbit, right? But there's also a theory by some people that we live under a dome.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing about the dome is that they can circumvent that. They don't physical whatever can prevent us.
Mm-hmm.
Like I argued with someone one day, and of course Facebook is where you go to argue with the best arguments.
Oh yeah,
So,
that's where all the brightest minds, philosophers, engineers,
would be know-it-alls go to argue.
Yeah.
So it is the finest of arguments.
Only the finest of scholars are allowed on Facebook.
Only the finest of scholars with arguments there. So I was arguing with somebody on Facebook, and this guy claimed to be a astrophysicist, which I found out was complete and utter bullcrap because he didn't know.
Self-proclaimed astrophysicist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he might have been an Astros fan. I don't know what he was. Somebody's drinking, go Astros, beat the Cubs, whatever they're drinking, beat them Yankees. No, but this guy, I just had to laugh because I said, dude, don't give me your credentials. Where did you go to college? Because I'm sitting here listening to this guy, and I'm like, and he's like, at least I went to college. And I'm like, well, I dropped out.
That means nothing.
Yeah, that just means
anymore.
You're indoctrinated. So basically, he was telling me, though, he was trying to make the argument in one of these groups that that's not correct, that they can actually leave the atmosphere. And another guy was saying, no, they can't because there's a dome, whatever. And I said it was irrelevant.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because we can't, by that theory, we can't do it, but they can because they can circumvent physical matter.
Well, yeah, I mean, like you see, or you hear accounts of people being abducted, and there's like they get phased through walls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I tell people this: The thing is, and this is the most important about this, is that these beings are actually ethereal.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is like they can become physical by tapping into a vibration. Their craft, everything about them is actually alive. I know that sounds weird, and it's probably hard to digest, and I'm not going to try to make you digest it on this episode, but that is the truth. And they can actually pull you out of your body. And so you think you're with them in a physical way, but you're really not, because our true state is a spiritual state. And like I said before, we're a spiritual being having a physical encounter, not a physical being having a spiritual encounter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the case. So whenever these beings, they do what they do, they take you into these other worlds or whatever. You got to understand something. There's countless people who've had near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences. People like we talked about who smoked different salvia, different types of drugs. They've dropped different types of hallucinogens. Why do they go to all these different places and then they come back here? Like I said before, this is a landing spot. This is a jumping off spot. Think of it like the pond Earth theory. If you don't know what that is, go look it up. And we're kind of surrounded by the ice wall, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a theory that people have. I don't know if I've adopted that yet completely, although I've seen a lot of.
It would be really, really cool if that were true, because I've seen a hypothetical map of like if the ice wall did surround all the known continents, and then there's like these like secret entrances that will take you past the ice wall to these like forbidden continents.
Yeah, forbidden for us.
Yeah.
But it's like that Chinese thing with the Xinjiang. I mean, the Forbidden City, and all these different, the reptilians that reside in that area. Those aren't the same ones. These are Dracos, the Draconians that use these triangular ships, and if they're not human, back engineered ships, but we can't do what they can do. We're trying to mimic it. It's like if you bought a Lego set and you're missing, you get like a truck, you're missing the wheels.
Yeah.
Like, congratulations, you have this beautiful truck that you could. It's all made out of Legos and no wheels. That's a problem because you're not going to be able to go anywhere, and they know that. That's why it was a sucker's deal to begin with. But a deal's a deal. You make a deal with the devil, you get what you get. You shouldn't be doing it in the first place. And of course, the military-industrial complex does what it does. I mean, it's going to do.
It's kind of the equivalent of like trading shiny beads for vast swaths of land. For,
exactly
with primitive tribes.
Yeah, and these tribes didn't understand the concept of owning land.
Yeah,
they're just like, you want that tree? Go ahead and take it. I don't own that. I mean, yeah, my people live over here, but I don't care if you want to call it yours. It's really nobody's.
Yeah.
So what to them, they were getting free, beads and alcohol. Because you're not. We didn't. Then they're like, you're moving in. We didn't know the concept. There was a trick.
Yeah.
So it's all based on that. Yeah. I look at that case as like very. It's a not an uncommon thing. It's just if you can identify these beings a lot of times by their propulsion of their craft or whatever some people claim to. Some of them seem to be using a sort of more primitive propulsion system, to move around. They're not always using that grid. And then some of them look like they're just completely using that magnetic grid with no sound, nothing. And I think it's kind of optional, just like we have vehicles that are like, some of them use batteries and gasoline. Some of them are just gasoline. Some of them are just batteries. I think it's the same principle. I think it just depends on the model and what they decide to do, You got to realize these are beings that have been here for long time, long before we have. And they've had that amazing technology. It's ancient alien. That's what it is.
Yeah.
They're ancient, but they're very modern. It's a weird concept to think about because we think we're at the height of technology. We're not.
No.
And, the MIC, the military industrial complex, I mean, imagine the technology that they have. And then imagine these beings. And what I've been told is that the tall whites have a more advanced technology even than these guys. So you can imagine,
Yeah, we're basically sitting at the kiddie table.
We are. And so these tall whites, they come through walls and they take people and they just open up a Stargate and walk right through it. And that happens, man. And people will talk about these tall white creatures, that come through.
Speaking of white creatures, Don't we have a rake story on the docket? Something similar, like a pale crawler.
Yeah. There's a couple,
Uh-huh.
and we had talked about them. There's one out of Louisiana. It was like a swamp, that setting, or there's one that was up in North Texas. Well, not North Texas, but it was north of Waco.
Mm-hmm.
Which one are you referring to? The guy on horseback?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So this one happened just north of Waco. There was a ranch. This happened back in 1998. And it was a guy that said, "Hey, my uncle used to own horses, and we would go out there, and he had 14 acres, and it wasn't a real huge tract of land or whatever, but his uncle was retired, and his uncle used to work for the aeronautical industry." Funny that we were talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
For all we know, he could have been working on it. Could have been skunk works or who knows what, but I'm not going to speculate or whatever. But it's funny how that is, though. We were just talking. His uncle worked in the aeronautical industry for years, and he retired. He bought a little spot of land, but it came with its own inhabitant. And his uncle, this guy's name was Daryl. His uncle, he was convinced that this creature was alien in nature, like it came from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so his uncle was a pretty smart guy, but he was sort of a rough around the edges, just very like pragmatic type guy.
No nonsense.
No nonsense. Yeah, no nonsense guy. And I saw a picture. He kind of looks like Burt Reynolds. He's probably like, this alien guy. What's he look like? Punch him in the nose. It's like, they were on horseback. He goes, and I was with my uncle. And like I said, this guy's name is Daryl. And he says, Daryl told me, he says, it was with my uncle. We were riding horses. And he gave me a couple of those stories too. But this one in particular was creepy when he was a kid. This is one of the things that jump-started his fascination with the paranormal. And he's a listener to the show now. Shout out to him. And him and his wife both work in the medical field now. So but he said, he goes, my uncle had a ranch, and it was out in the middle of nowhere. And it was like east of Waxahachie, I believe he said. I believe that's what he said. But he said, dude, it was kind of out in the middle of nowhere back in the 90s. And he had, like 14 acres or whatever. And then, but there were neighboring ranches, and they pretty much gave him free range. Like he could go out in their area. Like they didn't care. They were pretty friendly with him. And one of those people had sold those acres to him that still had their ranch out there. And they told him, they said, hey, there's something weird in that area that likes to hang out in that area where the woods are by that pasture. Like there's a big field, then there's this big mass of trees, and then there's a big pasture behind it.
Mm-hmm. So
there was like this trail. And he said that his uncle and him were riding horses one day. They're going out, and his little sister. And they hear this rustling, and the horses start to kind of rear and jerk. And uncle's trying to get him to calm down. And they see this creature, the way he only described it. He said, dude, it was weird. It was like kind of like how Gollum moved on all fours, but it was pale, had pink eyes. And it was like the way that the eyes would blink, it was like they would go from the bottom to the top. Like it would go up. And he saw it up close. And the horse reared and almost bucked him off. And his uncle pulled out, his rifle and was taking shots at this thing. And this thing just jumped and crawled up a tree the other side real fast, very spider-like. One of the things he said he remembers noticing was the legs, that there were like these, the heel. And I've heard this a couple times, but not a whole lot. And it was recent. Every time I've heard of it, it's been something recent. They had like this spike on the heel that was kind of like digging into the tree when it ran up the tree. And there were like these 3 toes that he saw in the front of the foot. And he just observed one of the feet like pretty closely. And it had these really long claws that looked like they were at least 5 fingers, but maybe only 4. Like a thumb and 3 fingers, but he couldn't remember for sure. He goes, I couldn't be for sure because it happened so fast. And he said the thing was up the tree like lightning. And he goes, and my uncle was like, y'all get back. Let's turn around. And so we got our horses. The horses didn't need much persuading. They turned and they were running back toward the house. And his uncle stayed out there firing at this thing. And then he came back to the house. and they were freaked out. They stabled the horses, had to get them to calm down, give them some treats, whatever. Uncle tells them, "Hey, man, I'd seen this thing before. I'm sorry. I didn't know if I'd really seen what I had seen. So he didn't lead them into harm's way because he didn't really believe in it. And even after he saw it the first time, he really didn't believe it. And so Daryl was like, if my uncle knew that thing was out there, he goes, I would be kind of ticked off as I got older. I thought about it, he goes, but he didn't, even though he had seen it before, he didn't believe it. And then they saw it again on the 4th of July in 1999. They were out popping fire. Well, it wasn't the 4th of July, but it was for the celebration of whatever. It wasn't on that specific day, but they were popping fireworks, and they were out there at his uncle's place, and they just kind of put it out of their mind, but they knew that thing was out there. Now, he said that if it stood up, it'd probably be 6.5 feet tall. So it wasn't no little tiny thing. And it had a very muscular body. But it was very like the face. He didn't see teeth or anything like that because it looked like it was just like a bulbous egg-like head. Definitely, the pale rake crawler looking thing. There was like this pink, like what the muscles and everything. It looked like a pink tissue that connected the muscles. They were white. Very bizarre. The eyes were pink. Yeah, I mean, it just there wasn't really much more he could tell me. He had a couple dreams about it afterwards that he's convinced, though, that were just because it scared him so bad. I mean, he was like a 13-year-old kid when this happened, and his sister was like 9. So, yeah, it was horrific, looking at this thing, seeing it, and they don't, you're told like these things don't exist. This is all, your imagination. He said years later when the whole rake phenomena hit, he was like, what in the heck did I see? Was that what I saw? Was it that? And then was that the rake, And so the second time and the only other time he saw it was a year later when they were out popping fireworks, and they took the four-wheeler out. They had a four-wheeler, and they went to go ride it around, and they would, like I said, they could go into the neighbor's property because the neighbors were semi-retired ranchers, and they eventually sold their land. And they didn't care. They didn't have a lot of cattle back there anymore because they were too elderly to take, whatever. So they sold it. Their uncle acquired another 12 acres from them, the back end, and then he had put some cattle back there. Well, they saw it again when they were riding their four-wheelers. They see this thing kind of down on all fours, just with its head up above the grass, and they could see it. Look, the grass was pretty tall, about 1.5 feet, and they could see it looking at them by the tree line. It was just observing them, and there was just one of them, of their cousins, described it as looking like a white monkey with no tail, but it wasn't fur, obviously. It was pink and white, and then it just ran off into the woods. But they avoided that those woods like the plague because that's where it stayed, was that clump of woods. And eventually their uncle went out there and was messing around because one of the cows had gotten locked up, in one of the trees that was rotted or whatever. One of his bulls was out there, and I guess it had he doesn't know exactly what happened, like maybe because the bull was hyper aggressive, and it would chase the horses and deer even. And yes, they will do that. A bull will absolutely do that. They don't like any other animals coming into their territory. And bulls are weird. It depends on what they were raised around. But this bull had gotten its horn locked up in one of the rotting trees that was on the ground. So their uncle went out there with a friend of his, and they were trying to get this bull, and this bull is very ornery, and they're trying to keep it from injuring itself. And they see this thing looking at them from up the treetop. His uncle had seen it many times, but they noticed that on the bull's back haunches, it looked like there were big scratches and marks on it. And so they think maybe that this thing was responsible. But a weird thing happened, and they don't believe now that that's the case because they had found multiple coyotes and hogs on both properties over the years, unalived and just laid by the fence line. This bull, they thought had chased something and gotten hung up in the trees or whatever. they think it might have actually been engaged with something else. Because a couple days after this incident, and he shot at it again because he thought this thing attacked my bull, and my bull was fighting with it. That's why it ended up in these trees. They found mountain lion tracks. And then a couple days after they saw the tracks, which would have been, at least, 4 or 5 days after the incident with the bull, the bull had to get treatment for deep bites, scratches. The veterinarian came, looked at it, and they talked about it, and he thought it was consistent with cat claws. So a very hungry, possibly desperate mountain lion probably attacked it while he was trapped, while he was locked up, while his horn was locked up in the dead wood. And that is the best assumption they came up with. But for whatever reason, they found that mountain lion hanging from a low branch right there at the tree line. And it was deceased, and it was a humongous male mountain lion, over 200 pounds.
Jeez.
According to what Nick said. That happened when he was like 17. And so his uncle had acquired that land, when he was a kid. And so he said that he didn't know why that creature was probably what was unaliving these other predators. And they never lost any cattle to it. Like, none of their cattle was killed. They lost one of the calves and a mother that had given birth, but it was positively identified as coyotes. And these coyotes, when I say coyotes, it was Texas, whatever. It was coyotes. Some coyotes. But this creature, they think, might have been responsible for actually unaliving some of those coyotes. So I told him, I was like, I've never heard of one of these things being benevolent. I've heard of them being sort of ambivalent, maybe, but not benevolent so much as just it doesn't care.
I don't think so. I mean, there's got to be a reason why it wouldn't just go after the easy prey.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's because what it decides to attack goes beyond just it being hungry.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, why would it choose to attack a mountain lion or coyotes or
feral hogs?
Yeah, feral hogs.
Dangerous animals.
These dangerous predators.
Territory.
And not the cattle. I mean, isn't there a theory about these pale crawlers that if they consume enough of a certain type of animal that they'll start to assume its characteristics? If you're going to do that, why would you want to assume the characteristics of an animal that's not as dangerous or as well equipped?
Think about this, folks, and if you're listening, and you're a listener of the show, go back to the episode Shape-Shifting. What did we name it? What did we call it? You named it.
Is it interdimensional shapeshifters?
Interdimensional shapeshifter. The egg.
Mm-hmm.
The egg thing. Remember? I don't want to call it an egg. It's more like a ball.
Yeah.
It's like a ball. And that ball has this energy that can become a consciousness. And that's something I've known for a long time, that this does really exist.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting to hear someone talk about it that was not really in the know of that. And so when she was explaining this to me about this egg ball thing, whatever, I was just approaching it like I didn't know. But we've talked about it on the show before about how you look like a ball.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that whenever that spark is gone from the orb, and not all orbs. That's the thing. That's the key. There's just so many different things going on, right? It's all happening at the same time. Because time actually is not, it's the currency of this world, is not real. This ball, when it becomes untethered to life, it becomes just like a dead whatever. But it's still, it's like clay. And when a spark of energy hits it, it can become a new consciousness. Does it make sense? The energy is still there, and then it opens it up and it creates whatever it is. What if, and this is way out there, folks, and I'm not smoking salvia, all right? What if this thing, these pale crawlers, and that was all that Nick could really tell me. He had other stuff, but this isn't a show about all the stuff happened to him. He had a Dogman story, but it's too in depth, to talk. I can't, if I started talking about it, it would take 2 hours or whatever. Then that's for a YouTube show. But anyway, thank you, Nick, for that, giving me that encounter. What's interesting, though, is you take these rakes, let's just call it that, even though that's what they call picture. What's it called?
Creepypasta name.
Pasta fiction. Creepy pasta.
Yeah.
Papa fiction. That's Papa fiction.
The creepypasta was based on the actual phenomenon, not the other way around.
Exactly. There's something that was there, and I've talked about this on the show too, on the YouTube show, where to me, there's really nothing that we talked about with James Bartley when he was on about reptilians and vampires on the live stream. There's nothing that can really be created. It's already there. It's just discovered.
Yeah.
And people think that, I thought of this myself. Your thoughts come from somewhere.
Nothing new under the sun.
Nothing new under the sun. It's already been done before. And we're discovering electricity. No, it was already there. These beings didn't discover these ley lines. They didn't create them. They were already there because it's part of the matrix. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it sounds crazy, but there's so many beings that they're pitiful and think that they're God, and people who think that they're God. Oh, yeah, some guy was on the show talking the other night about this guy telling him he thought he was God, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I get it. You're your own God. You're your own universe, yada, 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 but you're still a peon. You're still nothing.
The weakest deity I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah, anybody who claims that they're God is pretty much the weakest deity, whatever. I mean, Christ was the Son of God. You know, he never says he's the God, but he's part of the Trinity, which together makes up, the Christian version of God. But as far as anybody else, I mean, who's God, right? But there's all these different, ideas about what is reality and what it, and how about this with these creatures, that could be what's going on. Like these beings, they have like there's no substance. They're just a ball of lifeless clay that expands, and when it's like you water it with energy, and then it grows like a plant.
Yeah,
and it blooms, and then it becomes this thing. And not unlike what Ella and Jerry Williams, Jerry's a Choctaw, and his claim is that he can track Bigfoot. Well, there's a lot of people that claim that. Natives, though, would probably be more adept at it because they've been around it a lot for hundreds of years more than anybody else. But there again, though, we are just humans, these things, but they do leave a physical signature. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily physical. But they have this ability to assume different forms. And there's a lot of different beings that shapeshift. Somebody was in the chat on the live stream the other night talking about that, about how there's a lot of different beings from different places that can shapeshift. They come here. Just like people, whenever they have out-of-body, near-death experiences, they always end up coming back here to this landing spot. This is an interchange, like an interdimensional highway. We're on that road. And I believe that these beings, like the Rake, they're a sub-natured being that can become something. And it could be like what we were talking about, how this thing is eating the predators because it's becoming more predator-like. Now, I told Nick this, a little bit of this, not all of it, but I told him, I said, you need to find out from your uncle, who's, he's passed on now, but his children, and his oldest daughter in particular had lots of information about what her dad had told her, which is this guy, Nick's first cousin. And I told him, I said, you need to talk to them and find out, what's going on here, because there could be, more to this. Like the uncle may have, because he made a comment one time when they were at dinner that he had encountered something like this before when he was working up in Fort Worth. And he was like, not real, like, I don't know, what it was that he had seen. It happened when he was in California, my bad. But anyway, he ended up, retiring out there back to Texas. They were originally from Fort Worth. But he was, talking about it. And then his other cousin, one of this guy, his uncle's sons, Daryl's first cousin, was fishing on the Trinity one time. And he saw one of these creatures that can be described as rake-like. Rake like,
Mhm.
floating across the river. They thought it was like a balloon,
Yeah.
and it turned over, and it was this weird looking creature. But it was spread out, kind of like a parachute, and then it just submerged. And he couldn't tell where the head was, but it was
Gross.
bat like all the way around it. There was white,
Yeah.
and it was dusk, and it was almost dark, and they saw it go into the river, and they were like, "What is that?" But it's interesting that he saw that, and that could be the same thing. It might be something totally different. But that was his uncle's son, his cousin.
Mhm.
And then Nick's like, he goes, "I don't discount anything. I know what I saw." I say the same thing. I told Nick that. I said, "Yeah, me too," because I know what I saw. It looked like a freaking werewolf. Maybe these rakes are those creatures. Maybe this is a pre-werewolf.
Maybe they're like a primordial form of different kinds of cryptids, whether it's werewolf, Bigfoot. Like maybe they start out as this like very like primitive, ugly, nasty form.
Well, you think about like the Inner Earth too, like the story Edidorpa.
Hmm.
In Edidorpa, where the guy, he says, "I am the man that this happened to." Well, he goes down into the Inner Earth, very Alice in Wonderland-y like, and his guide is this kind of formless white reptilian type creature, and it is the Inner Earth, and he's kind of guiding him through these levels. It's a very weird thing. But yeah, those two stories were really freaky stories. We got a little bit of time. We can tell another short one. Then
Yeah,
this,
sure.
yeah. We got one about a gnome. We got a ghost encounter that's pretty freaky. I don't know which one. What do you, dealer's choice, or what do you want to do?
Go for the gnome.
You always like to hear about these little people,
Yeah.
dude. So, anyways, this one's weird, and this was out of Kentucky. And the person that gave me this story, now this didn't happen out in the backwoods of Kentucky like you would think. This isn't the LBL or anything like that in Tennessee, Kentucky area. This happened out in an area in the outskirts of Louisville, like a suburb of Louisville, Kentucky. And it was very weird. This person had been hearing scratching and like weird, like meowing sounds at the window. The problem is that there's no tree by their window and they're on the second floor. So they were like, how in the heck is there a cat? So this person's dad, her name is Donna, but her dad had convinced her and her brother that it could have been a cat that had climbed up the wall from the siding, right? And they're like, well,
You could have told him it was a goat and it would have been more believable.
yeah, most of our house is rock, They're
Yeah.
like, and then there's just some siding at the top. So she was like, yeah, no, I don't believe that. She had some pretty weird stuff going on though, and we don't have time to tell it all, but I'll tell the gnome encounter, that one. What she called it a gnome because when she was in the backyard and her dad was in the backyard and he had like a little putting green, right? And her dog had gone out there and her dog had taken to the putting green and taken a crap. So he was getting, so the dad was like, there's all this yard out here. And it goes and it takes a crap right there on the putting green. And then she started to realize, she's like, every time my dad would go out there would be poop out there. And she started to notice, this is funny, man, but it's also weird and creepy. But she said she started to notice that it was not her dog. Her dog was smelling something and it was pooping or peeing. Because, an animal, it'll start to pee and poop where another animal does, right? Like it'll mark a territory. And I think that's what happened with this dog. This dog was going out there and, and it was a little Cocker Spaniel. And it was, she said it was a sweet little dog and it was a puppy and she didn't know any better. And so she was going out there though and she was urinating on a spot and pooping, But she's like, the first time that it happened, she walked up and she pooped next to what was already there.
Mm.
And she's like, and I thought about it and I was like, I didn't let her out. That was the second day that her dad had laid the green down in the backyard because there was an area of grass that just would not grow. And her brother was upstairs. He practiced guitar. He was a little older than her. And he was in a band, like a lot of teenagers. I'm in a band, man. Wild Mustangs forever,
They're all going to make it big.
They're all going to make it big, man. We're going to be rich. So they're up there and he's practicing. He's playing his guitar. And one of his friends is like, whoa, dude, what is that? And they see what at first they thought was like, it looked like like a toy. But it was moving around. And they're like, what is that, a radio-controlled toy? And this was so weird. So one of them gets his camera out, and when he gets its camera out, they just see this thing move like a blur real quick, like take off. And then it goes like what looks like it goes through the fence, not under it. And he goes, if I didn't know any better, I could have swore it was wearing like a little light blue jacket with a red hat. It was like a little man. And they all ran outside and they were looking around for it, whatever. They had a bigger dog that went out there and was barking and acting up, whatever. And that was her brother's dog. And this was before the Cocker Spaniel puppy had started going out there and pooping and peeing. And the brother had failed to mention that they saw this thing. And admittedly, he is a pothead. She's like, my brother was a bad pothead at that time. So if he told me that, I would have just laughed and been like, stop, smoking pot and eating up everything.
Yeah.
Right? And she's like, and he had a habit of just eating up my food all the time, and it was annoying. So he had left Cheetos outside for this thing. So the dog goes out there, eats the Cheetos, and this thing catches his attention. He's sitting there strumming his guitar in the back. There's like not a deck, but a patio, right, with a covering, like an awning. And he's like, tells her that he sees this little creature, like walking toward it. But his dog got loose and took off after it, and it ran, and it went up the fence, like it was up and over the fence. And it went so fast that when he tried to take a video of it, it just like a blur. There's just like a blur, almost like an orb.
Yeah.
That it looked almost like an orb. But anyway, there's a video of it. It just looks like an orb. Or just at the end, it kind of does. You can't really tell what it is. It's like a streak. And he said prior to that, this thing was actually like kind of tiptoeing toward the food, like it was trying to get it. And according to him, he told his sister that he actually did feed it at one point.
I was just about to say, it's a good thing he didn't get to the food because that would have been considered tribute.
He did.
Oh,
And they fed it, and some things happened. And we can talk more about that because this particular encounter gets even more weird.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually led to them seeing what I think was a Bigfoot. I can only describe it as a Bigfoot, but we don't have time to get into the whole semantics, whatever. So what happened was this thing, they believed that it was pooping on the dad's green because they would come home and there would already be poop back there.
Yeah.
And it was this small poop, that looked like a puppy. Yeah, she was a little puppy. But as she got bigger, it kept happening, and the dad gave up, and eventually he quit using it because it had gotten pooped on so many times. And they all came to the conclusion, including the dad, that it was probably this creature because the dad said, well, I don't know how it's happening, but this small poop keeps happening, and this dog is no longer a puppy, right? Mm-hmm. So how is this still happening? And so it went on for 2 or 3 years, but like you just said, you hit the nail on the head. He was leaving this thing like little pieces of sandwiches and chips and soup and different things. Very processed foods. Probably made it very angry because it made his stomach hurt.
Gave it indigestion. And that's why I was pooping on the green because he was feeding it crap. Like, what is this? He was
giving it Taco Bell.
Yeah. What is this high fructose corn syrup crap? You know what? I'm just going to, here, take it back right on your green.
So anyway, but they think that the dad had angered it, because he took a big old patch of land from the backyard, an area of the backyard that should have belonged maybe to this creature.
Yeah.
Interesting too, the house of the people that they bought it from, the lady that used to live there, just like the story with the Rake where it was in the woods, those people knew it was there. Mm-hmm. She said that they had seen some weird things in the backyard.
Mm.
And that one night she saw an owl swoop down and grab something, and that the owl let it go when it crossed over the fence for whatever reason. And then the owl just kind of shrieked and let it go.
Mm.
But she said it looked kind of like a little man. So I don't know. But there is more to that story, and it involves what I believe was a Sasquatch, because I think that, like you said, the tribute, I think it started something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it brought a friend. That's my opinion. I don't know for sure. We talked a little bit about it on the live stream one night. Anyways, folks, that's all the time we have for tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. There's so many of these encounters. We were trying to get these smaller ones on the TikTok, and instead we just ended up using it for the shorts.
Yeah.
But if you like the shorts, go to TikTok and you can actually see clips of the show, of the shorts, and eventually, you'll find something that you're interested in and follow it to the YouTube channel and watch it. We talk about just about everything that's weird and mysterious. So from all of us here at Paranormal Roundtable, you be safe. Good night.